Well, welcome everyone. Um, we are so happy you are here. I am Jan Jeremias, and I have spent over 35 years involved in health in one way or another. And for the past 20, I've blended my clinical research roots with a love for holistic wellness to support both people and their pets in living longer, fuller lives. It lights me up, helping others to see the whole picture of their well-being and get to the root cause of their health challenges and to help them to create a simple, meaningful blueprint for health. One of my top values is kindness and compassion and how we can learn and nurture that feeling for ourselves. And I'm so grateful to share that path and that passion with my dear friend and collaborator, Mary Jane McQueen. Um, we believe in bringing kindness into the world, one creative project, one breath, and one conversation at a time. So a heartfelt thank you to Mary Jane for joining me on this path and others here. And a big thank you to everyone here for showing up and being in this community. As it is because of you, this community exists. So I will pass it to you, my dear friend.
Thanks, Jan. So, as I know most of you here know who I am, but I am Mary J. McQueen, and I'm the owner or graphic designer, creative director, all of the above of MJ McQueen Creative Studio. And I did have a career spanning more than 30 years in corporate marketing. And for the last 6 years, I've been privileged to serve as an entrepreneur. I'm really a heart-centered entrepreneur who really loves to have fun while locking arms with my clients to help bring their vision to life. And it's really about, it doesn't matter if you're a small business entrepreneur or just someone celebrating a milestone personal event, this studio, my studio, is for you. So as always, I'm so honored to be here with Jan and of course all of you. This community has grown and it feels like we're weaving an amazing tapestry together. And it's filled with threads of creativity, love, and light. So thank you truly for being part of Spirit Born Imaginings and for being part of our little community here. So I welcome you all. Um, I'll go ahead and share the poem now, Jan.
Perfect. Yeah.
So the poem today is called The Art of Acceptance, and it's by Bria Rivello. And it reads, when the pain is just too real, feeling makes us heal. Anger and sadness, all part of the grieving process. Not 5 steps and over. It takes time to become emotionally sober. We often have to self destruct before we finally have enough. We mourn the childhood that could have been if it weren't for our parents' sin. We mourn the loss of a romance, not possible because of circumstance. We mourn the loss of dreams disrupted by life schemes. We mourn the loss of family, torn apart by dysfunctionality. Life may not be fair or right, but reality is something we cannot fight. Only in surrender can we see how to set ourselves free. This is achieved by the magic three: accept what is, let go of what was, and have faith in what will be. Acceptance is the art that heals the human heart. This is how we forgive, so we may finally live.
Thank you so much, Mary Jane. Such a beautiful poem. So welcome everyone to accepting what is. We are so glad you're here today. This time is a space for gentle presence, a moment to pause, to notice, and to meet life exactly as it is. Sometimes what arises in our minds, in our hearts, or in our bodies feels heavy, challenging, or even unacceptable. And yet today we are invited to practice something radical, to meet it with clarity, with compassion, and without judgment. Acceptance doesn't mean we approve of everything, and it doesn't mean we give up. It simply means noticing what is, allowing ourselves to feel it fully, and letting go of the struggle against what we cannot change. This act of openness frees us from the unnecessary suffering, clears the mind, and gives space to see what is within our reach, what we can influence, what we can act on, and where wisdom asks us to release our grasp. Today, we'll explore both wings of acceptance: clarity, seeing our experience clearly without distortion, and compassion, holding ourselves with kindness even in moments of discomfort. And as we move through this conversation, notice how it feels to simply be with what is. Notice the resistance, the tension, the urge to control, and gently allow it to be. And notice the relief, the clarity, and the quiet freedom that begins when we practice acceptance. This is our time to rest in presence, to let go of the battle with what is, and to open to the possibility of acting from a grounded, clear, and compassionate place. Take a breath and let us begin.
It really is a radical thing to think about, um, letting, accepting, um, accepting what is, as our title is for today. Really, it's sometimes it's a stretch, but it really is true because it's like you're saying, it's not liking what's happening. It's just really about seeing around us clearly and not wasting any more energy about what it is that we might or might not be fighting against, because there are so many things in life that we can not change, including other people that may surround us that we may not agree with or we may not understand, as much as we try sometimes. And I just really, it's really it is a radical way of thinking, but that's something I've really been leaning into of late. There are so many things happening around me, for me, right now, that I have absolutely no control over. And so I just really, yeah, I really love that this topic today. It has a very, it's almost peaceful, not complacent, but peaceful.
Thank you, Mary Jane. I love that. Peaceful. Um, and one of the things that really came and was kind of in our preparation this week for this topic was this idea of accepting the part of me that really can't accept. Or, there's still the part of me that accepts, but the part of me that wishes it was different. And allowing that both both to exist or coexist within myself. I think that, accepting or allowing that part for me, that part of myself, which wishes it was different, even within the part of myself that is allowing it to exist, is seems much more complete and whole to me, as opposed to trying to deny myself, like saying, okay, I accept this, and trying to push out the part of me that's like, the voices in my head that talk to me and say to me, oh my gosh, I wish it was different. I wish this hadn't happened. And I think we all have circumstances like that, where we eventually, I think we get there. But I think a lot of it is that dialogue in our head, which, like, kind of spends a lot of time in that place of, you know, it happens with all the things like you mentioned that we cannot control. The passing of a loved one or a pet, the law, something that's very unexpected, and even the things we do expect is to allow it to be here and in its entirety. And that's all the things that go on, even in the acceptance that we have.
And let's be real, it really is a process. I can only vouch for my personal experience when I was restructured. I know I shared it here before, so some of you already know this, but when I was restructured out of my job after 31 years, that came as quite a shock, to say the least. And it took time to get to the acceptance. I mean, it's really been a process for me. Um, it's like a grieving process in a sense because well, no, it is a grieving process. Let's be real. Because it's so much part of it can become so much part of our identity especially after so many years and that connection with people. And then, of course, we had an even further disconnection from people in the few months just after I was let go at the end of 2019. So it was definitely a process of acceptance, not necessarily an easy path, that's for sure, as any of these things are. Um, but it's just I guess coming to terms or setting the terms for yourself as to what you're going to keep and what you're going to let go.
Absolutely. And I agree with you. I think it is a process. I think, and there are points where that will, I think where it almost resurfaces, not to the extent that it did,
Mhm.
but when it's immediate and it's just happened, I think it's very common to sit there and even, you know, I think it's very common to go through a stage where we spend quite a lot of time wishing that it was different. And then I think for me, it comes like the realization of like, I can wish all I want, but this is what happened.
Yes.
This is the circumstance, and I can, my mind plan, cajole, think of like all these different things. But bottom line is that it is what it is.
Well, except
And,
exactly.
and I can, and therefore I just have to go with it. And then eventually, I think that if you can accept, then you can move forward. Then you can possibly make the next step. But I think if we spend too much time, in the space of wishing it was different, and, then there is no room for plans. Like we don't have the energy, nor do we have the focus to come up with what might be the next best step.
Well, exactly. I think that's the thing that both the process really is like, it's just being able to take that step forward, like moving from, a place where by accepting and moving forward, it's like trusting that inner guidance to help us take that next step forward, but from a place that feels more, I was gonna say rooted. I think I have rooted in my brain from our collaboration. Um, Rooted or grounded, I guess, is another word we could use for it. Um, but yes, thank you, Darlene and Al, for reacting to that since Al's been participating, so that's cool. And well, of course, Darlene's our collaborator. So, but yeah, just being coming from a more grounded space and feeling that it's, not being stuck in that rumination. I think that's the word that was coming to mind when you were talking about how we, like wishing and hoping, whatever. It's like, it's not like not addressing or not looking at what is happening. Acceptance is not that. It's not that you're putting your horse blinders on and not looking at it. It just really is about, you know, not getting stuck in that place and to keep moving forward in some way that feels right for wherever you are at that time. And that can change. Pivot. That seems to be a common word. I know Jan and Darlene and I have a good laugh about pivoting.
Yeah,
It sometimes life feels like a constant pivot. So
absolutely. And I love a few of the things that, and a few articles that we used to prepare. There were a number of articles by Tara Brach, and if you don't know who she is, Google her. She's a wonderful mindfulness meditation teacher, and has been around for a very, very long time. And she has a few things that she shared in basically working with trauma or working with situations for people that are very hard to accept. And she says, meeting what is, even our fear and pain, with presence and care is the beginning of healing. And then the other one is she talks about it's the courage to be present with life as it is, acceptance. And it's the doorway to freedom, to let go of the struggle against reality. And I think that that's what we do. We struggle with what is. You know, we spend so much time. I mean, from personal experience, I don't know. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in my life, I think, wishing things were different than they were, you know, certain circumstances, because especially when in your mind, the whole idea of them was never as you envisioned what was going to happen in your life. I think that we don't envision, we don't plan for things to happen like, trauma, death. For me, my divorce, like it wasn't something I ever thought was going to happen. It's not like I go into my, the relationship with my ex-husband ever thinking that we would end up getting divorced or he would walk out. And so when he did, I spent a lot of time wishing it was different. Probably too much time, but I spent the right amount of time for me. It was, at that point in my life, it couldn't have been any different because I was who I was. Talk about acceptance. Acceptance means accepting all the parts of yourself and your process.
Well, exactly. It's just like they say with grief and a grieving process and this process either, well, of course the divorce could be a grieving process as well, but reaching the place of acceptance, there is no specific timeline. Everybody's unique in the way that they process things and the way that they sort of address those things. And so, yeah, I mean, the process was perfect for you and it was as it was meant to be. You know, there's no you can't push it to move faster, even though sometimes we really wish when we're grieving and things to to push those feelings aside. But what's I don't know the exact saying or who said it, but it was like, like the in grief especially, it's like the feelings of grief and loss. It's just shows that you loved. And so that's, being open to that yeah, as you said, accepting ourselves just as we are. And I like how you brought up Tara Brock because I liked when we were doing the research stuff when it was talking about how she looks at this whole thing about two wings of a bird.
I know. It was beautiful.
Yeah, I just it's just she says well, she just basically said that, when two wings would develop together, free us from self-judgment and unworthiness, allowing healing and wise, open-hearted action. And it's true. It's genuine acceptance, right? Seeing clearly and holding our experience with compassion. That's compassion. That's a big word, isn't it, Jan?
Yeah.
It's the
Yes.
word of the day.
It's the word of the day. And I think that's so true. And, any sort of ending, no matter what it is a grieving process. I mean, I did write about my divorce as, and the grief of my divorce and, not my last book collaboration, the one before, Faces of Grief, where that was what I wrote about. And I think, various people wrote about many different things, from losing people to mental illness that were basically still, physically here, but were not the people that they were. Imprisonment, somebody's who had a family member who went to prison, and that sort of grieving process. And then loss of people as far as, like passing and transitioning. And so there was this whole, was a pretty amazing, all the stories were pretty dynamic and amazing. But I think that it is this idea of holding ourselves with compassion, of allowing ourselves to be human and to process things and to go through things as we are able at that time. You know,
Yeah, well, that's very true. And I guess we're on the we love Tara Brock
yeah,
bandwagon, but I really liked how her perception was is that really that in healing of the trauma, of accepting, of working through that process, it's like the light shines through the broken places.
Hmm.
It just was such a beautiful visual. 'Cause that's who I am at heart, right? As a visual person. So, just to see is like the stained glass or the mosaic, the broken pieces making something beautiful.
Yes, and I loved the bird, the two wings of the bird,
Yes.
and I could see that, and I could understand this feeling of acceptance, of seeing whatever happened clearly, and then the compassionate holding of ourselves in that space. And that's why when we spoke earlier about accepting the parts of ourselves which are in denial, which are, unable and spend a lot of time wishing things, in the what ifs or, wishing it was different and just holding it all there and allowing and knowing that holding that place in that part of ourselves with such compassion that we are able to courageously move forward one step at a time. I, it's interesting because I was telling Mary Jane and Darlene yesterday, one of my, and I mentioned it here, that one of my primary values is compassion and kindness. And now my shift from that being who I am, um, and have it like probably, spent, not that that's been my value my whole life, but I think that I was never included in that kind of value, kind of left myself out of the equation. You can be compassionate and kind to somebody else, but directing it towards yourself and being able to hold yourself in that same space is is different. And so that's where my shift has become, not giving up like that outwardly kind of thing, but also allowing myself to have space and to be a human being, you know. I think that that's, I think that that's really, now to me, a true calling when we can shift our values that maybe are, our values of how we operate in the external world and think to ourselves, is that how I see myself?
That's yes. Yeah, because there is that element too. It's just like, there's no good in the comparison. There's nothing comes from that that's good because we are our own beings. We are on our own path. And we process things the way we process things. And so it's not that we can't change or pivot as needed, of course, but at the same time, not comparing ourselves. And yes, as you said, allowing for ourselves the same grace and ease that we allow others to have when they are working through their own process and accepting that that's their process.
Absolutely. And I think no matter what we do, like that comparison, I mean, comparison a little bit is like, I think it helps you grow and kind of work to improve yourself and or whatever. But you also have to not accept in a bad way. You have to know who you are. And I remember years ago, and I might have shared this story before, when I first did my yoga teacher training and I was teaching a lot of, I was teaching classes and I was trying to make my classes like my teachers. Like I'd sit there and I'd plan out the whole class and I'd write down every like word that would come out of my mouth, in the sequence and all that kind of stuff. And that was part of the learning. And then realize like waking up and one day and thinking to myself, no matter what I do, I can't be her because I'm not her. Like it was obvious but not obvious. I was working very hard to copy her basically. And then realizing that I couldn't copy her. And my classes were very different, still wonderful, but just very different because of who I am. And so I think that all of a sudden you realize that like I took all the wisdom that she gave me. She was a wonderful teacher, my teacher Cheryl, and I'm still in touch with her on and off. She's amazing. But that it was I brought to it my own energy and personality and humor and you know and my own intellect and everything, as each one of us here brings who we are to whatever we do.
Yes, that's absolutely, it's absolutely true, Jen. It's true. Yes, it's true. Comparison can make us grow in some ways, but when it becomes comparison where we start saying negative things to ourselves, or we don't accept ourselves for how we are, that's where the right? That's where the further trauma we're causing ourselves by doing that. And it's human nature, I think, to do that. But it's, I think,
Absolutely.
being aware of that, and you know, it's just it's the awareness of that. At some point we aren't aware perhaps of that space, and how we are dealing with what we're dealing with. But when we become aware of it, we have the opportunity to perhaps be different, react differently, and just love ourselves for where we are, and for where we're at as far as in our growth. So it's just it's an interesting process.
Absolutely. And but one of the things you said, and I think it was so important to me when, as you said it, because I was thinking it, not because I was thinking it wasn't important, but all of
I
a sudden
get
I was like, oh my
it.
gosh, but it was like the fact of like when we start to compare ourselves to others, and then we think we're less than because of that,
Yes.
or it goes into that negative place of even wishing we were different in some way. Um, and not, and I think that we spend a lot of time there, and all it does is the more we attach to that, the more suffering it creates within ourselves, the more unhappy we are because we've attached and we've given so much energy to that kind of, you know, spending a lot of time and energy in the space of, I wish I was different.
Yeah. Human beings, I think, in general, tend to live there until they learn to um, perhaps move differently.
That's right. And so, Zara, please.
Good morning, Mary Jane and Jan, and apologies I was a bit late. It's back of the drama again today. So the subject today, as I was reflecting to you both listening, seemed to have a theme around connection and with ourselves and with others is kind of like I think the topic that came to my mind. And it reminded me of the whole kind of like, you were talking about your divorce right now, Jan. Now, I don't know what was that personal situation there, but I remember before COVID, one of my friends came round to my house and she was at a point of questioning her marriage. And she said, I want connection. I want connection. And I thought, well, what happened? I mean, did you not have connection when you met? Was it a lack of communication? Was it like you guys spent less time together? And we just started talking about values, like what we value as people and what our partner puts first, and how those two things have to, it's like a dance, really, of trying to get our values right together as a couple. And I thought that was one of the most important things. And then later on, I discovered this thing called uniqueness. I understood that there are certain people who are fixed. It's almost like it's quite tricky for them to be adaptable, whereas other people are naturally adaptable. And it's kind of like it creates almost like two types of marriage. So, like, you get the couple that can connect, but they can't spend too much time together because it kind of gets overwhelming after a while. So they end up spending more time away, like they're working away, they're spending time with other people. Um, and then there's this other type of marriage where there's like the couple just love spending time together so much they just can't get enough of each other. And that's what I like to call a natural connect. And I think COVID caused a lot of those people who were working away from home to suddenly all be on top of each other. And I saw a lot of my friends actually get separated over that period. So I think, yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Our lifestyle, and sometimes a big change like that can happen and come out of nowhere. And suddenly we have awareness around, oh, it's not that he doesn't love me. We just have the second type of marriage. So how can we creatively do something about this now that we're in lockdown? And I think that's why a lot of people ended up setting up businesses. We had that boom, didn't we, of a lot of entrepreneurs starting to set up businesses because people were reaching out to other people. And I guess they just started talking and they found a common ground and a goal or something they felt passionate about. And so, yeah, it's that reaction versus, responding. Yeah. You can either go off and kill each other and get divorced if you're on top of each other and you can't stand each other, or you can find other ways. I don't want to say to entertain yourself like you were doing before we were in COVID. So those were the thoughts that came to my mind, Jan. So thank you, Jan and Mary Jane, for allowing me to share, and everyone else in the audience.
Oh, thank you, Zara. I'm not, I don't want to go into detail. I mean, I can't go into details. I'm never shy because the story's in the book. And I'm not saying the marriage would have worked or not. I mean, I've been divorced for over 20 years, so it was far before COVID. It was more the manner upon which it was done. Was basically came home, said he wasn't happy, and he walked out. Literally, I basically never saw him again except for in divorce court. And so for me, it was something that was not worked on. He didn't want to. He was done and he walked. And I would never have done that in any situation. That's not who I am. And so it was the trauma of hearing those words in front of me as he stood there and said, I don't love you anymore. And I threw up. I literally got physically ill. And so it was like, and I'm not saying the marriage probably would have ended anyway, but I would not have done it like that, as traumatic as it was. And so I think that it's a different scenario than what you like what I'm understanding you to say. And I'm not saying that communication it was the perfect relationship, and by any means, obviously it wasn't. But there are ways to do things and ways not to do things, in my opinion. And he
Yeah,
couldn't.
first of all, I'm sorry you experienced that. No, I wasn't aware of the particular situations. That's not
Situation.
nice. You didn't deserve that at all. I think the least we could do is respect each other, isn't it? Especially if we've chosen them as our partner. That's one of the least things that you would want to do as a human being is to at least respectfully, care about the other person's feeling at least. Yeah, and love's a funny thing. What's love? We say love's giving without expecting in return. I think we sometimes confuse it with, being in love, which is what I like to call being very much linked to entanglement. So are we not spending enough time together? Going back to that again, is this just our perception? Do we like somebody enough to want to spend time with them? I think is, really why probably we're all here, Jan. We love you. Mary Jane, we love
Thank
you, right? We're here.
you. Thank you. I think you bring up something true. Do we like each other? And I think that, also we go into a relationship or a marriage or anything thinking, with the feeling or the idea in our heads is we want to be understood. We want someone who understands us. And there's a wonderful, wonderful podcast it was the most listened to podcast in like 2000, I don't remember what year, in the New York Times. It was the most like sought after, I think it was, but most read article. Sorry, it was the most, and it was called How You Will Marry the Wrong Person. And it was by a guy named Alain de Botton, and he's interviewed on Krista Tippett's on Being, and I mean, it's one hysterically funny, and also his whole idea of like what we go into a relationship or a marriage looking for. He said he always like bells go off when he's like listens to a couple and he says and they say, oh, he completely understands me, or, and everything he said, it's like radar goes off. It's like, danger, 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 because he said basically no one will understand you because they're not you, and it's only based on communication that anybody can understand you. But we assume that someone gets us because they're with us. And then we don't understand why they like do things. Like if they only understood me, don't they understand me because they know I don't like that, kind of thing. How we go in with a lot of assumptions. It's a wonderful podcast, and I'm happy to share it with it because I've listened to it multiple times. But I think that that's, how we go into ideas of relationships. And I think that we even do that with ourselves. Like we act and we don't totally take the time to understand why we, what our, where we're moving from. It's like, I think the same thing applies to our relationship with ourselves. Like, do we really understand ourselves? And do we have compassion for ourselves?
That's a really valid point because we can have triggers, can't we? And sometimes take ourselves by surprise at times. And so we go around assuming that we know ourselves. But I've caught myself off guard once or twice. My husband said to me, "What goes through your head when you get like this?" I said, "Well, actually, nothing's going through my head right now. Well, let's talk about it when I've calmed down a bit." But, you know, it's like, yeah, what goes through your head? Where do you get like this? And I'm like, I just reached my limit, really. I felt like no one had heard me or listened to me. And everyone was busy doing their own thing with their own struggle, like you say. So sometimes it's not just being compassionate towards ourselves. It's almost stepping outside of our busyness and going, okay, what have I missed is going on there? Because if they're struggling and there's something I could be doing to help them, that could then open up the space so they have more capacity for me or for us in general as a family. Because it's all linked, isn't it? We're all connected. We're all living together in this same space. And I think sometimes it just becomes about me, the demands that we kind of expect. And I think, yeah, isn't it about expectations that really ruin relationships?
I think that's a good point. Expectations. And I
Mhm.
think that one of the things he talks about in the article, which I really loved, is he talks about the fact that, we don't really get training. Like there's no like kind of course in love or relationships or whatever. And he said what ends up happening is he said we do it based on movies, based on books. And he said they have a lot about the falling in love part and nothing about the actual relationship, like of what it means to be in a relationship long term and what's involved. He said it's always about the easy part, really. It's like when you fall in love and everything is wonderful and everything. And when he said it, I just cracked up because it was so true. If you look at any rom-com movie, like, I mean, it's all about the mushy stuff and all like, oh gosh, look at how cute they are, it's wonderful. But nobody goes through like 5 years down the road when you have three kids because nobody wants to watch that. People don't want to see that in the movie theater or read that in a book because they live it. But we also don't have any training on what that's like. We think that, you know, we think that life is always going to be that first year, I think. Not like maybe as you get older, you don't, but I think when you're young, you do.
Not to be confused with butterflies as well, because some people think, oh, well, I haven't had butterflies now. That means that I don't love them. There's so much misconceptions out there. It's like, what?
Exactly.
They never had butterflies? So how can they still be together? I'm like, well, maybe we need to rewind a little bit here.
Oh my goodness. I love the this conversation. But it's true. I was laughing because I'm like, yeah, I would never, I probably never in this lifetime will I ever say that I fully understand myself and my reactions sometimes to things because yeah, so how would I expect anybody else to really understand me completely either? That's kind of an odd notion to me anyway. But I love that. It's just, but coming to a place now, I mean, obviously day by day it can change, but coming to a place now where I'm learning to accept myself as I am. Not that I can't change or be moved or to grow, but just to accept myself as I am and to move forward from that space, and realizing that no, nobody else really is going to understand us completely. If I can't completely understand myself and I'm living in this, as a friend of mine likes to say, meat suit, um, why would I think somebody else can? And that's why I think giving people, like I was saying earlier, about giving ourselves grace and ease, the same grace and ease that we give to other people as they work through their process of accepting who they are and moving through that their day-to-day lives. So, but
Absolutely.
I love the perspectives.
No, absolutely. Of accepting people. And I think it is. I had this conversation I mentioned last week. I had this conversation with someone who was talking about being kind and how kind she is, or how she tends to be a kind person. And then she was talking about hating herself. And I'm thinking to myself, like, ooh, like something about that was just
There's a growth.
so like jarring to me. Um, because I felt like there's obviously some sort of like, to me, it has to be involved, like you have to be working on both. Otherwise I don't know, it's not coming from a good place, just my feeling, or it's coming from a place of some sort of agenda or ulterior motive, even if it's unknown to the person, but it's not as genuine and heartfelt, and the energetic flow isn't there. Um, but um, one of the things you said, and that is to, basically to give, Mary Jane was basically to give people the benefit of the doubt. And I think that is, I think that's the only way to navigate the world. Otherwise, we're so judgmental and so harsh all the time, angry because, technically maybe things have not gone, quote unquote, our way. And we have to bring a little bit of compassion and understanding into it. Otherwise, I think we're doomed as a species. I don't think there's any room. There's no space then. Um, and I think that I've mentioned this story, but it always impacts me when I was teaching in person where I did my training. I taught there for many years before COVID. Um, and one of the teachers was this, woman who was she was amazing, and she always had a smile on her face, never a negative thing to say about anything. And one day I'm looking at her Facebook feed, and she's talking about the anniversary of her daughter's death. Her daughter was a medical resident in Florida and was murdered. And I never knew. Like, I had no clue about that part of her life at all. And I remember thinking to myself, you really have no idea what happens in people's lives unless they share it. But, if you don't really know someone, and then, you're a casual contact, or even if you're a very personal contact to somebody, like you know them quite well, there are parts of people that, parts of everybody which is not shared. And it was just so dramatic to me, as all of a sudden that kind of, it was like a shock. I thought to myself, oh my gosh, like, and it was just that kind of the light bulb moment where I thought to myself, oh my gosh, we really have no idea what people go through. And I think that you then have to, like, not that it changed the way I treated her, but on some level, I think it did. I just always had that in the back of my mind of how amazing a person she was to have gone through that and still be this smiley and kind person. That was just, you know, it was,
Yes.
it was, it blew me away. And so I think that we really have no idea. Mary Jane, sorry I interrupted you.
No, no. I was agreeing, agreeing with you.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just, yeah, it's true. We never fully understand what somebody else might be going through if they don't necessarily share that, and that's their right to do that too. But yeah, it's just, that the lady that you're speaking of, it's really, she worked on a path of recovery, obviously, because just you know it's recognizing the experience and just really reconnecting with life and seeing that there was still, perhaps even with a sense gratitude that there are still beautiful people and places and things in life. And um, I guess in some way, not that she forgot or didn't let it think, obviously it's always going to be part of her, but she didn't let it define her. She accepted what is because it was a situation she couldn't change.
Exactly. So beautifully said. I mean, I think I read at one point that, she talked about forgiving the
Wow.
guy, the guy who had murdered her, who, um, you know, they found and was in prison. And yeah, and that in itself, to be able to forgive someone for some, obviously a situation which we talk about, which, she couldn't change,
Mhm.
but, you know, she was able to come to a place of realization that she could forgive him.
That
I know that, yeah, sorry. I know that Al now has, but Zara also had her hand up. So maybe Al, you go, and then we can have Zara.
This week's topic is accepting as what we are. So accepts comes from a skill acronym starting with activities, engaging in attentions. That means when we are having attention and absorbing the task, like doing cleaning or puzzles or walking or baking. So C is for contributions. So contributing, shifting our focus to help others through volunteering or doing something kind for a friend. C is for comparisons, gaining the perspective by comparing your situation to others that are less distressing. E for emotions. So intentionally cultivate a different emotions, such as watching a funny movie or reading an engaging book. P is for pushing away, temporarily set aside distressing thoughts or feelings to deal with immediate needs. And T is for thoughts. Redirect your focus using cognitive distractions like repeating a mantra, singing song lyrics, or listening to a podcast. And S, the final one, is sensations, using our five senses to ground ourselves. This can involve intensifying an intention, such as holding ice cubes or take a very hot or cold shower. So this is for this week's accepts. Thanks.
Thank you, Al. Um, yes, Mary Jane's applauding. I'm going to applaud without, not on screen, but with my hands themselves. Um, Zara, did you want to share something?
Yeah, I had a question from Al. First of all, Al, um, I'd love to know how you come up with these acronyms of yours. Do you do it during the session?
No, I do it. I always prepare
Oh,
beforehand.
you always prepare. Okay. How long does it take to do that?
Always depends how long the word is. The word can be sometimes too long and sometimes too short. So it always
So what?
depends. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So
Thanks.
reflection time, and it's like a puzzle then. And you mentioned about the five senses the other day. I don't know, I was scrolling on LinkedIn. Someone said there were seven senses, and it was all to do with feeling your feet on the floor. And I don't know what the other sense she was talking about, but I was a bit confused. So that's something I'm going to look into because apparently that helps the children who are struggling with things like autism get more grounded. So I don't know. I'm gonna want to know more about that at some point. But we were talking about forgiveness, Jan.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think I'd love to hear your definition of forgiveness if you wouldn't mind sharing that with me.
Hmm. I don't know if I have a definition. I think of forgiveness somewhat like acceptance in a lot of ways, is not necessarily condoning what someone did, but allowing it not to take hold of you anymore.
Okay, and what do you do about the hurt? Because this is where the confusion comes from. I've asked this question from quite a few people, and some people are like, oh yeah, it's just like letting go of the hurt. and not
Uh,
letting it get to me anymore and stuff like that. And that's what I mean by forgiveness. So almost like forget.
well,
What
I
would you
mean,
say to that?
I don't know if you can ever forget. I mean, I look at the
Oh,
situation I had,
hmm.
with my ex-husband, and I don't know that it's in me. I mean, it's basically an embodied experience. I mean, I had a physical reaction, and I think maybe cognitively, I mean, do I think about it every day and every moment anymore? No. Do I go for months and years? Probably don't think about it. Yeah, somewhat. But it doesn't like, I also look at it as a gift because it brought me to where I am now. I mean, it brought me to yoga. It brought me to this whole new way of life that I have no idea whether I would have gotten here anyway, but I wonder. So I look at it as hard as it was, it changed my life. It made me a very different person. So I think that did I ever forget? Nah, but I and do I have I think I almost like, I think of, in some ways you have scars, but those scars, it's like when you get a physical scar, the tissue a lot of times is stronger than it was earlier. And so I think there's a strength that I have that I didn't have then.
I understand. I think there's two ways of going about it. We get people who want to get their own back, don't they? Like take it back on somebody or take it out on somebody. And then there are people like you, Jan, who almost use that scar to heal others. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, I did. I took that energy and used it in my work. But I think the other thing that happens is that, sometimes I think two things happen. Either you go out and you're externally, take it out on the world, or you take it out on yourself. And
Mm.
so I think some people internalize it. I internalized it. I took it out on myself. There was a lot of self-blame there, a lot of self-anger, um, talk about denial of who I was, like, you know, spending a lot of time in the places of if I had been different, would it had happened? But then coming to the point where, of acceptance, like, maybe, but I wasn't and also that wasn't who I was. And then also not being able to see it because obviously it was a shock and maybe there were signs which I couldn't see. And I had a really, a really hard time around that. It was like, how could I not have seen it, seen what was
So I
coming?
think what we're talking about here is that whole cycle of change and grieving that process to getting to the point of acceptance before saying, well, how can I move on? Something along that line. Yeah,
Well,
that's
and
the
I think
process.
I think you have to accept something to some extent to forgive. I mean, I don't, um, I think that, I mean, in the last, 20 plus years, I have had I think I had two conversations with my ex-husband. Um, one was to actually, where I actually called him and said, I forgive you, because it was like the kind of thing where I knew I wouldn't be able to go on had I not, even though on some levels, I don't know that I had, but on many levels I had. And I think there was, I felt like the only way I could move on and not hold on to that energy is if I had to say the words.
I
Yes.
love that you did that, Jan. That's like almost like making peace with him, isn't it? That's what I call real love, actually, for yourself and him to go, okay, I'm releasing you. I haven't got a problem with you anymore. I forgive you. And I don't know, but maybe watch and then I don't know, karma does the work, I believe, in the end. So I don't,
We
yeah,
can only
I'm just
hope.
gonna
No, I'm kidding.
no, 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 no. That's how it works, unfortunately, for him. If you forgive him and he's hurt you and you're the good person, then I do believe that he will see his karma. And that's what I call justice. But going back to forgiveness, would you mind if I share what we call the non-contradictory definition of forgiveness?
Um, how, sorry, but I'm just looking at the clock. How long, Zara?
Oh, I don't know, it's 30 seconds, not even
Okay,
that.
okay, yeah, yeah, please, please. I just didn't, because I want to pay attention to the time.
Yeah,
So
sure.
yeah, please, please.
So it's not about the forgetting or the hurt, because if you say I'm going to forget that you hurt me, you're basically going to go, well, do this to me again somewhere, right? We're almost going to reinforce brain damage. So all it is to say out loud that you're not going to equal your justice. That's it.
Beautiful. And I wanted to speak to something that Austin is graciously putting into the chat. We were saying, does forgiveness require acceptance? And Austin was sharing that he thinks it's the other way around, that acceptance includes forgiveness. I agree with that, 100%. It doesn't. I think sometimes people, or I mean, all of us, I'm sure at some point, is like, forgiveness and acceptance doesn't mean condone. So
Mm-hmm.
you don't condone the action. You don't necessarily forget the action. However, I know from my own personal experience that, in order for me to move on, because me holding on to that um, trauma to the point where is it affecting the other person anymore? No, it's affecting me. And so letting that go, and just really, um, in the sense of understanding that we are people and things happen, but really just accepting and forgiving. And the forgiving goes both ways. It's not just forgiving the other person. Sometimes it's forgiving ourselves, Jen, as you were sharing that, sometimes you don't see, may not see the things, but forgiving yourself for not seeing those things as well. So thank you, Austin, for bringing that to our, observation, because it's true. I do feel, yeah, of course it's as anything else, it's a process. Um, but it just, in order to take the step forward, the acceptance and perhaps the forgiveness, if that's what's required for our own well-being, that's the path forward.
Absolutely. And Darlene said something in response to both of that. She said she thinks it's a little bit of both. It's like a
Yes.
combination. And I don't know that it's really that separate. I almost think it's, as we're talking now, I almost feel like it's a dance. It's like you accept, you forgive, you go through you forgive it on a level, let's say, and then you accept some more, and all of a sudden the forgiveness gets deeper. So it almost feels like it's a lot more fluid and it's not so compartmentalized, like I accept and then I forgive. So thank you, Darlene, for sharing that, because I think that's really true. I think it's almost like, I forgave on a level and then another level where, let's say, I forgave myself. And then, I forgave him on a deeper level. And then also I accepted on a deeper level, and so I think that it's just kind of, it moves a little bit, and it has to move because we evolve, and when we go through something and it becomes, and we own it more, and it integrates into who we are. And here's our word, Darlene and Mary Jane, it integrates. Integration, here we go. It integrates, it becomes part of us.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. What an amazing conversation today. Thank you everyone for, in both the chat and in the actual, the sharing and the conversation. It's just a beautiful thing. And I think, what do you think, Jan? Do you think now's the time for some integration with some beautiful meditation?
I I think it's perfect time. So take a moment to settle into a comfortable position. Allow your body to arrive. Let your breath arrive. Let you arrive. Gently close your eyes or soften your gaze if it feels comfortable. Begin by noticing the simple rhythm of your breath, not changing it, not improving it, just meeting it as it is. In this moment, nothing needs to be corrected. With each exhale, allow your body to soften a little more. The shoulders, the jaw, the belly, letting the breath be a place You do not have to manage or control. Now bring your attention inward. Imagine you are sitting at the doorway of your own experience, simply observing what is here, the sensations, emotions, the thoughts, and the quiet spaces in between. See if you can meet whatever arises with a gentle acknowledgement. This is here. No fixing, no pushing away, just seeing clearly. If an emotion comes forward, maybe stress, sadness, frustration, or even peace, allow it to be present. Notice where it lives in the body. Is it tightness, warmth, fluttering, weight? Let yourself breathe into that place, not to change it, but to simply hold space for it. Now softly say to yourself, let me see this clearly. And after a breath, let me hold this kindly. These are the two wings of acceptance: clear seeing and compassionate allowing. And as you breathe, you may notice a part of you that wants things to be different, that wants control, that resists what life is offering. This part is human. It is tender. Offer it kindness. Tell that part quietly in your heart, I hear you. You're allowed to be here. And then gently bring your awareness to what is within your circle of control. Your breath, your presence, and maybe your next small step. And also notice what is not within your control: the past, other people's choices, the pace of certain changes, the outcomes you cannot guarantee. Let the breath help you loosen your grip around what you cannot change. Inhale softly, and on your exhale, imagine placing down what is not yours to carry. You don't have to force the letting go, just allow the possibility of release. Say quietly to yourself, in this moment, I allow things to be as they are. I allow myself to be as I am. Feel the simplicity of that truth, the relief in it, the steadiness. If it feels right, place a hand or your hands gently on your heart or on your belly. A small gesture of care, of kindness toward yourself. A reminder that acceptance is an act of love, not resignation. And when you're ready, begin to deepen your breath. Wiggle your fingers, your toes. Invite small movements back into your body. Take one intentional breath in and a soft, releasing breath out. When it feels right, let your eyes open and lift your gaze.
That was beautiful, Jan. And just before we close out for today's conversation, I wanted to share a piece of the Serenity Prayer, which reads, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as the pathway to peace, taking as he did the sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that he will make all things right if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy forever. Reinhold Nimbauer.
Thank you all for joining us today. Please take a moment to connect with Mary Jane, myself, and everyone else here in this event today. Mary Jane and I have a LinkedIn Facebook group called Spirit Born Imaginings, which is a heartfelt community whose mission is to embrace self-care, self-kindness, self-love, and self-compassion in a nurturing environment. And please join the group for inspiration, guidance, and announcements. All these events and our member highlights and other surprises are on our Spirit Born Imaginings YouTube channel. Feel free to like, subscribe, share if that feels right to you. Mary Jane and our last workshop for 2025. Gosh, kind of hard for me to say that. It's Sunday, December 7th at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you'd like to join us, we'd love to have you. We have, we'll put links in the comments as to how to get to those events. We also have a short survey, so we'd love to hear from you regarding programming or ideas you have for our programming for next year. And then also look out for our 4-part series, Rooted in Stillness with Darlene. There's 2 more sessions to go in that 4-part series. But you will get all the recordings if you register. And so, feel free to register now and you'll have the 2 recordings from the November dates. The next one is actually December 3rd with Mary Jane. Yay! Um, which is called Open to Awareness. Have a wonderful weekend. If you celebrate Thanksgiving, have American Thanksgiving, have a wonderful Thanksgiving next week on Thursday. And just so everyone knows, we will not be here next Friday. We are going to take Friday after Thanksgiving off. And so we will be back in 2 weeks.
Yes, absolutely. For those that are that's celebrating, have a beautiful Thanksgiving. Fill it with little moments of gratitude and joy. And we look forward to seeing you not next week or hearing you not next week, but the week following. So we look forward to being in your presence then. Thank you all.